787. Yes, that is the number of lives we've lost in recent months. In fact, it's not 4 months yet, but we've lost this number of lives. And per those who, those in authority, they've been telling us that should this trend continue, we could lose lives numbering in the thousands in the year 2021. And that all has to do with our conversation on ending road accidents. Just this morning, we've heard of another accident on the back of the one in Tesano yesterday, this time at the 37 enclave. And we'll be bringing you details of that right here as we have this discussion. But it's ending road accidents. Stakeholders, major ones, are going to be engaging us this morning to proffer pragmatic solutions to this menace. And that is the conversation we have now with our guests, Dr. DARKWAH, a transport consultant, Kwame Kudia ATUAHENE, Head of Regulations, Inspection and Compliance with the National Road Safety Authority. And we also have others who will be joining the conversation. Cecil Gabra, who is a transport consultant and CEO of Top Tech Limited. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining this all-important conversation.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
And good morning.
Great. So I'm going to start from here. There are so many dynamics to look at, and we're going to be digging into them one by one. I'll start with Dr. DARKWAH on this beat. Now, okay, so I'll start with you, Mr. Kudia. On this beat. You're with the National Road Safety Authority. I'd like to find out, for example, looking at the Buipe-Yafe Tamale stretch, it's become a death trap. We know that for a fact. Many years in succession, we've had a number of accidents on this stretch. The most recent one you know of, 13 people losing their lives, 7 people being injured, taken to the Tamale hospital. What has the NRSA been up to this point in time in terms of this first quarter, looking at the carnage? What have you been doing to reduce the carnage on our roads?
Well, thank you very much. I missed the early part of your question.
So in simple terms,
I'm not too sure which reference.
Yes, let me just clarify for you. I was pointing, for example, to the Buipe-Yafe Tamale stretch. And that is where in recent times in Alipe, we had that accident that cost us, 13 lives, 7 of them 7 others being injured, sent to the Tamale hospital. But my question to you is, we've seen the trend, the uptick in the numbers. So this year, what has the NRSA been doing, basically, in this quarter to minimize some of what we've been seeing?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think that is true. Regrettably, though, that on that stretch, we are beginning to record some of these disturbing incidents. In fact, if you look at the trend over the last couple of months and even years, it appears that on that stretch, some of the major concerns has got to do with driving very tired and night-related issues. In the early part of March, we have met with the operators to try to look at close to about 13 crash investigative reports, which pointed to the need for us to begin to look at how we can assist the operators to break their drive for long distance routes, essentially those that travel in excess of 8 hours and their likes. I think you'll recall that in early part of last month, some regulatory directives were issued. I mean, the overall intent is to be able to exercise a bit of control on the fatigue-related incidents as they relate to high occupancy, intercity. So that's what's being done. We have issued directives that the operators should deploy 2 drivers for such routes, deploy logbooks in their vehicles to assist us to inspect and monitor the level of compliance, submit a journey plan that will indicate where the drivers will be required to take their mandatory rest, all with a view to get us break that cycle of crashes occurring as a result of driving tired and driving for long periods. I think that's what is being done at present. But I must also say that in the generality of the concerns, we have also deployed close to about 150 road safety inspectors who are employed by the authority, and regularly what they go to do at designated terminals is to be able to conduct pre-departure checks on some of these vehicles before they leave the terminal. The plan in the medium term is to have the operators themselves appoint road safety officers who will be trained to use our predetermined checklist that will give us real-time feedback on these inspections that are conducted. I mean, all of this is to complement existing efforts like sensitization, daily outreach, what we are doing collectively with the media as far as the Arrive Alive campaign is concerned. And also, as part of the major measures, in fact, we observed from about 2 years ago, if you notice, as a result of some support we got from the presidency, close to some 13,000 high-risk drivers were trained. I need to say that the training was not enough, and there's a need for us to do more, especially in the way that they deal with hazard perception.
Right.
In the short term, what we have asked is for the operators to take responsibility and ensure that at the very least, all their drivers that run these high-risk routes should be trained by themselves, except that the instructors and the content must be one that is approved by the authority and the licensing authority. It is because, I mean, due to resource reasons, the authority is not in a position to be able to train them, as expected. But we have done some bit of training. I just said some 13,000 the last 2 years or so. But that is still a fraction of the number of drivers we have in that space. But ultimately, we think that this is a commercial enterprise. I mean, these are persons that are providing service for profit. And at the very least, to ask that they train and retrain drivers will not be asking for too much.
Okay, so that's...
As of this time, we haven't had as much resistance from them.
Okay.
We agree in principle that that is a responsibility that must be carried out by them. We have given them some time to comply regarding the training. We have given them up to the end of June. And by July 1st, we'll develop a mechanism to go around to see the level of compliance and possibly apply whatever sanctions that may exist.
Okay,
forward.
I'll come back to you shortly, Mr. ATUAHENE.
As far as the training bit is concerned.
I'll come back to you shortly, Mr. ATUAHENE, but let me quickly welcome Dr. GODFRED DARKWAH, a transport consultant who joins us via phone. Dr. DARKWAH, a very good morning to you. Hello. Dr. DARKWAH, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you on board. I just wanted to at least initiate the conversation from your end. I'll wrap up with Mr. ATUAHENE and come to you shortly. But Mr. ATUAHENE, so this bit you mentioned about this system that by June you're hoping these public transport operators will apply. If we're leaving it till that time, in the meantime, accidents are happening involving some of these major entities that you speak of. And I'm putting it to you that you're talking about what, even in the Yape situation where maybe a tired driver was involved, that situation there. The logbooks, that system you speak of, 2 drivers or more to ensure that tiredness is reduced. It's not being applied. Aren't we just talking a lot and not really doing the things that will solve the problems?
As far as the 2 drivers route is concerned, I can report to you that when we started our monitoring from 1st of April, we are beginning to see encouraging levels of compliance. I mean, I need to admit that we work in a very informal environment. I mean, that sector is predominantly informal. Nonetheless, there are operators that are beginning to respond. In fact, just yesterday, I received a report from Great Imperial Transport Company indicating their journey plan, the routes that are affected by the directive, the number of drivers assigned to each trip, and their likes. So some work is being done. I would encourage that we, in spite of the difficulties that we have on hand, I mean, these are operators that are used to doing, are used to some practices for a while, and it will take a bit of time for them to go over. But we are not about to sacrifice what we expect on the basis of their own difficulties, except to say that from the reports we are picking from the field, it is encouraging, at least for the 2 drivers assigned to these long distance routes. In the presence of, with time, we'll be able to put out sufficient data on what we have observed, and we'll also begin to look at steps to ensure that they comply with these measures, because they are non-negotiable. The law is clear on it, that if you use 8 hours, drive in excess of 500 kilometers, you cannot assign 1 driver for such a trip. The law provides sufficient backing, and most of them appreciate the impact as far as their investment is concerned. That yes, if we were to do this, at the very least, it will protect our own investments. We are also beginning to engage commuters as part of the enforcement protocols. That if you went to a terminal which is required to provide you for a service in excess of 8 hours, you must inquire. If you are not being assigned 2 drivers to the trip, you are at liberty to reject the service. That is what they could also do to bring a little bit of heat on the operators. But as far as that is concerned, I am happy to indicate that the feedback has been encouraging, and we hope to keep the momentum up until such a time that all the affected operators comply with these directives, and that we are committed to do it.
Let's engage Dr. DARKWAH, who also joins us via phone. And Mr. Cecil Gabra, I will be coming to you shortly, but let me initiate the conversation from the end of the technical people, the transport consultants. For you, Dr. DARKWAH, what do you see to be the glaring loopholes in our system when it comes to road management and regulation and enforcement?
Yeah. Good morning once again. It's interesting to add my voice to what is the discussion that's going on this morning. And my brother Fabi has said a lot.
Dr. DARKWAH, my apologies, but if you could just up the tempo with your voice a bit, we'd be grateful. Just speak up for us.
Yeah, I am happy about what my brother Fabi has been mentioned this morning, which we are in line with him. He has mentioned some of the factors that are causing this frequent road accidents on our roads. And I think I would just add a little, like sleep driving. We should look at this frequent occurrences of these road crashes. We should look at the timing of the crashes.
Right.
Look at them. And then we also look at the days of the crashes. It's very, very important. Then we look at the spot where these crashes do occur frequently. Let's do this analysis. It will give us a clue to helping the solution of this particular problem. People are being wrongful overtaking. Why do they do those wrongful overtaking? What can we do to treat the road so that those overtaking that cannot go on there? That's also good. Side bets is becoming frequent in this present dispensation of a crash. Let's look at this. Let's look at passenger silence. Why is it that drivers are overspeeding and then overtaking at wrongful places that the passengers in this vehicle are silent? Why? So these are all areas that we need to look at, conduct deeper research into that so that we can help solve the problem. But basically, when you bring all these ones together, my brother, what we see is that we needed government will, political will to support the task assigned to National Road Safety Authority and then the DVLA, to the extent that if it is possible to get a regulatory body that will oversee the work of the DVLA and then the National Road Safety Authority to help them be enforceable on the road. For example, we have in our law, we know studies have gone on and on and on. They are all pointing to the one fact that about 80 to 90% the causes of this crisis are as a result of human error. Overtaking is a human error. Fatigue is a human error. Sleep driving is a human error. Overloading is human error. Tiredness is human error. Passenger harassment is human error. All this was due into human error. So it means that the mental faculty of people who are sitting behind the steering has lesser knowledge in appreciation of what is going on the road, which means that their attitude and behavior is being affected. But anything affecting human attitude and behavior, it is critically provision of knowledge that change that fiber. Now, what do I mean? The law and the regulation specifically specified the mandatory training all users of the road, especially the commercial drivers who are not taking the chunk of this crisis on the road. What do we do to them? It is if their attitude is faulty, and therefore they are behaving oddly on the road, killing people and damaging property. What we need to do is to look into the law. The law makes clearly that drivers should have continuous training. And this training, I am saying here that government should not buy this while it is checked. You should leave it for the law to work. That everybody who owns a vehicle and uses public road should be made to go to regular training every 6 months without government paying. But the people, the owners of the vehicle and the drivers themselves had to pay or had to sponsor themselves for such training. When they do that, the DCLA and National Road Safety Authority to give some form of certification in addition to the driving schools or instructors who will be conducting this training. Now, when they do that, anytime the police are on the road and doing their rightful duty, they need to provide a valid certification from DVLA or National Road Safety Authority, showing to the police that last 6 months I was in the class learning. And the learning process should be continuous and sustainable. If we leave it to government to decide 3 million Ghana cedis once a year, it will not go anywhere. You cannot use 3 million cedis to fight road safety. No, you can't. The road you can't. You need a colossal sum to do it. But let the owners of the vehicle who have bought the vehicle come on or take over the sponsors of their drivers.
Right.
So that one, their vehicles are not going to be involved with accidents and kill people and people who have special life. And the training should be sustainable. Again, the training should move from training, progressing to education, progressing to professional education. That would change the moral fiber, which is the head and the mind of the driver, so that they can drive as a human being and stop killing innocent passengers and people on our road.
Right.
This is the way it should go. But it should go on this way, and then it is backed by law, supported by the police, that if we don't see any certification of a driver who is on the road, driving a long distance vehicle or even a short distance vehicle, because accidents also occur in a crime and kill people. So it should be general. So that when we try to put this one and we serialize the court, and the people are supposed to go to the court, then we are getting a solution.
Let me move on now.
You use technical devices.
Right.
It can be done easily too. If you don't want to train, if you want our people to drive without training, then let's go on with the one. Electronic devices. Every black spot in the country, about 251 black spots in the country, let's wire there with cameras, so that vehicles that run over the posted speed limit will be captured live and then give it to the police and prosecute them immediately. We can do that. That's what is quite expensive than going for the training. So the solution is ours. The solution is the political will. The solution is the generality of the population saying that there is a solution, so let's go for it.
Okay. Now, it's important that you mention, the political will in there. But let me engage Mr. Gabra now. You're also a transport consultant, and you are actually CEO of Top Tech Limited. You get into the training of, those who use, or motorists, I should say. What else do you feel is missing, the missing part of this puzzle, especially when it comes to training? Is our training outmoded, outdated? What more do we need? Do we need better training for our drivers? Mr. Gabra, are you still with us? If you can lower the volume on, I don't know whether it's your radio or TV set, of course not a radio, a TV set, and please unmute because I can't hear you properly.
Can you hear me?
Better now, much better.
Oh dear, today's sound is so bad. But anyway, right.
Is it? Can you hear me well? You're complaining about the sound. Can you hear me well?
A little bit. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
I cannot hear you, but I was just watching television, listening to the sound. Your sound today is really bad, but we always talk about road crashes when it happens. I mean, it happens every day. I believe a lot more deaths have occurred without counting the numbers at this time. Right, and then in Ghana, whenever there's any big accident, then we talk about it. It's time for us to take pragmatic actions to save lives. This must come from the top. When I say the top, I mean I'm talking about it should also be looked at by the president. I mean, we need to enforce the laws. Everything that happens is the laws. I heard my colleagues talking about it. Right, their life must work now. The powers that be who intervene by calling the police must be ignored. All the accidents are human factors, just like my colleague mentioned, right? So if we do not enforce the laws, training wouldn't even work. We operate a driving school as part of our work. You train the person, he goes back to the road, and then he sees that people are doing wrong things. He'll obviously do it. So we need to enforce the laws. And again, I repeat, the LI must work. If the LI is not going to work, we will sit down and talk and talk and talk. Right, if you look at the two accidents, it's just clearly the issue of speed. Are speed limits working? The law gives us the opportunity not to drive beyond 50 kilometers per hour when driving in town, 80 kilometers when traveling, and 100 kilometers on a motorway. It is time to fix speed limiters. My brother ATUAHENE is listening to me, and it's time to fix speed limiters. And I'm happy they are an authority. They should work with DVLA. All these buses and so on, there's one serious factor. It is all speed. When our speed is about 50 kilometers per hour, nobody is going to die. You may have some scratches and so on, but you will not die. But if it is more than 50, breaking distances, stopping distances, thinking distances will not work, okay, by calculations. And then the other thing that we need to look at is that apart from the speed limiters, we should also go back to the law that talks about tachographs in all those buses, heavy-duty vehicles in general. Vehicle tires must be manually be inspected. I mean, it is part of it. If you take the human factor, but who fixes the tires? It's still the driver who takes care of it. Speedometers. I am now asking that if it is a standard to replace the TV sets in commercial vehicles as passengers will be watching, they should rather watch the speedometer instead of watching movies. So when the driver misbehaves, the driver doesn't care, he'll be driving at about 90, 100 kilometers per hour. Right? So if he's moving more than 80 and then the passengers have seen it, they can also voice it out. And sadly, about 90% of the passengers don't know how to drive. So if the driver is misbehaving, they don't really know what happened. Again, back to the human factor. Heavy-duty drivers, just like my brother said, I mean, all drivers must at least once a year go through training. We are there to support them. We have been training for over 25 years. We are there. Heavy-duty, all of them must go through the test, and then they must also go through medical fitness. Okay. At least once a year. Most of them have eye problems. They have glaucoma. They have other diseases. They can't see well, but they are all on the street. They're still on the road, and then we are suffering. So it's up to DVLA, up to National Road Safety Authority to come up with very serious modalities, and I do believe that road crashes will go down.
Okay.
So training, enforcement, that is it, my brother.
Mr. ATUAHENE, let me come to you. Now, quite a number of issues have been raised. We've noticed that in recent times, poor lighting on our roads on the Accra-Tema stretch, among others, is a factor. We even noticed it in the Tesano incident yesterday. Something else tied to that, and I want you to address both for us, is the frequent breakdown of some of these heavy-duty vehicles on different stretches of our roads. And a lot of the time, they may not even have the right equipment to indicate to other drivers that, you know, an incident has happened. And in Tesano yesterday, we saw that drivers did not see, there was no warning triangle, and they crashed into this vehicle. The issue of lighting and the issue of these trucks frequently breaking down, maybe it may boil down to a lack of proper maintenance and the lack of, warning signals and all of that. What more do you think we can do in this regard? What more do you feel the NRSA can do to ensure that the right thing is done to save lives?
Maybe it may boil down to a lack of proper maintenance and
Mr. ATUAHENE, if you can unmute for us and maybe reduce the volume on your set, we'd be grateful.
What do you feel the NRSA can do to ensure that the right thing is done to save lives? Well, thank you. Again, also thanks Cecil for the comments. If you can unmute for us and maybe reduce.
Hello, Mr. ATUAHENE.
Yeah, is it better?
Well, it is. Please go ahead.
I was making the point that Mr. Gabra made the point about speed limiters, and I think, yes, he's right on point. And it's one of the discussions that we hope to get before the end of the year. It's been in the law for quite some time. And as part of the regulatory regime for commercial transport operations, when they begin to come under license, we're going to insist on those protocols, at the very least for long distance buses to be fitted with speed limiters as required by the current airline. Street lights, visibility is always at the core of every safety improvement program. For most part of last year, we had a number of discussions with the relevant stakeholder institutions. If at some point, it wasn't too clear whose responsibility it was to ensure that the lights stay on for most periods. And out of our engagement, it became very clear that the responsibility sits with the Ministry of Energy, because they manage the component of our electricity bill, which is set aside for that purpose. Unfortunately, they raise all kinds of concerns regarding the quantum of that amount. But the feedback we got from our engagement was that they were working on a policy to be able to provide some cure to that gap. For the Accra-Tema motorway, I think that out of BIDA and out of that engagement, we have seen some improvements. And we would want to urge that whatever policy that is being worked on will be fast-tracked so that we'll have a clear understanding what the issues are. Broken down vehicles, I mean, starting from what happened the last day or two, it is from the accounts that we have, or I have, it is obvious that the driver fails to deploy his advanced warning triangle as required by law. Cecil raised the issue about speeds, and I agree perfectly with him. Within a city, you are required not to do in excess of 50 kilometers per hour. If you look at the impact of that incident, I mean, without going to reconstruct the crash, it is obvious that whoever was in charge of that vehicle was driving in excess of 50 kilometers per hour.
That may be a point, so but you cannot take away the fact, Mr. ATUAHENE, you cannot take away the fact that owing to that vehicle being there, it led to the accident. I mean, even if someone is driving at a certain speed, there were circumstances that were created that culminated in that accident. And this trotro driver was not the only person. There was someone else who also went and crashed in.
Say that again.
I am saying that you don't create you don't create a recipe for disaster. We have a lot of this happening. Poor lighting mixed with these vehicles breaking down. Yes, there may be speeding on our roads, but when we add all these other factors, it only creates a recipe for disaster. Shouldn't we be looking at the other aspect as well? These vehicles which are frequently breaking down and without any warning. I see so many of them.
Yeah, so there are two other things we are doing in that space. The first is that these vehicles, as required by law, would have to be fitted with retro-reflective tapes. At the very least, they help to improve their visibility on our dark roads at night. As part of the recent measures or directives to the operators, except that it was limited to passenger-carrying vehicles, they are required to deploy those reflective tapes. I think
so. The question is, why are they not doing that?
The directives to these heavy goods carrying operators as well. On the other hand, when we begin to kick in the licensing regime, one of the requirements for licensing will be that an operator must show evidence of a maintenance arrangement. Is either you have a maintenance workshop or you have some agreement with an accredited workshop, so that we can be certain for quality assurance purposes that whoever purports to maintain your vehicle has the competency to do so, and also keep records of them. And that is what the inspectors, when they go around, will seek to check. So if you have 100 vehicles under your control, what is your maintenance program? Have they been followed? Are there evidence to show that the vehicles have been maintained even before they make themselves available?
Mr. Tiahene, just for clarity, very quickly, are these things that are already being implemented? Mr. Tiahene, please hold on for me. Are these things that are already being implemented, are they things in the works? I just want to know, because it is obvious that a lot of these heavy-duty trucks are not observing what you're saying, the reflective gear and this other bit you speak of. It's clear they are not following them. So is this something you mean to do, or is this something that they should be doing now?
Yes, I think what we should be doing in the short term is that we must work together with the police and DVLA as other partners to ensure that these vehicles that are required under the law to have these reflective tapes be deployed with them as soon as practicable. I mean, the gap, if I must say, is that for most part of last year, even though there was a desire for many of these operators to comply, the material went out of supply, out of COVID and other related issues. But we have an indication at the beginning of the year that they have taken some stock. And so I think there's a incumbent on us and all the related public sector agencies to begin to hip up enforcement of that protocol. That, I believe, is what we can do in the short term, and committed to doing to ensure that at least we can improve visibility at night.
Let me run this quickly by you on the issue of road tolls. We heard the sector minister, Kwesi Amoako-Attah, actually talk about the reintroduction of these road tolls and all of that. They were kicked against, but we hear there's going to be a reintroduction. What are the dynamics to take stock of? What should people expect? And are we going to get better roads, better facilities, road infrastructure on the back of these road tolls?
Well, that is our expectation, that at the very least, the road fund is supposed to raise revenue for maintaining some of our roads. And they also assist the authority with funding for our programs. We concede that education alone has not solved the safety problem anywhere. You ought to have a perfect mix of education, enforcement, and engineering. And so if the roads are not of good form and shape, we will expect that the ministry responsible for infrastructure will assist in that path. But point must also be made that if you look at the data closely, in fact, a significant percentage of the crashes will occur do not happen on the bad roads. I mean, do not happen on the bad roads. Often they occur on roads that are flat, they are straight, they are properly marked, like the Yape Gupe crashes that we've had in recent times, except that they are single lane it represents one of the good roads that we have in that stretch. So whilst we deal with other measures or countermeasures, we would also want to hope that the Ministry of Roads will prioritize, especially this discussion about dualization of our major corridors.
Okay.
Because what it does is to limit the risk of head-on collisions, as we have seen in Yape the last few days, and a number of incidents up north.
Mr.
So that we can also complement that effort with other measures like education and these enforcement protocols that come with our regulatory responsibility going forward.
There'll be a lot to talk about on the educational front moving forward, but I'll take your final comment, Mr. Gabra, on this discussion we've been having. What will be your final take? I suppose Mr. Gabra is still with us. Can you hear me, Mr. Gabra? Dr. DARKWAH, are you still with us?
Right, can you hear me now?
Who's speaking, Mr. Gabra?
Mr. Gabra.
Right, please go ahead with your final take on this, briefly, sir.
Okay, so what I want to advise now is that if you look at the accident, especially what happened yesterday in Accra, right, if we had advance warning triangles, that will have helped. I want to urge the police that they shouldn't arrest anybody today, but let's stop about 10 cars and find out whether they have the advance warning triangles in their vehicles. See, that's also one fact that we have to check. Apart from the human factor, a lot of drivers don't care about this advanced warning triangles. Others are also saying when they have it in their vehicles, they will steal them. I believe that if we have massive education on that aspect alone, how to fix it, a lot of people don't know even how to put it behind their vehicles or in front. You need two warning, advanced warning triangles for this purpose, and it depends on where you have the breakdown. The accident that occurred yesterday could have been avoided. We are talking about issues on big trucks. If we have the advanced warning signs, I'm telling you, we will not have any accidents. I want us to do an education on that. Let's check vehicles and find out whether they have them.
Okay.
And honestly speaking, out of about 10 vehicles, maybe one will have the two advanced warning signs in
and that is a great problem. But thank you very much, Mr.
My brother, Mr. ATUAHENE will bear with me that it's all boils down to education and enforcement when we talk about the technical ease in road safety. Right? We have spoken about roads. Our roads are not very bad. We have a lot of good roads. Now, when you speak to other African countries who visit Ghana, they'll tell you that we are doing very well on roads. But people also must know that if we have good roads, we should have rather lesser accidents. This morning, I heard your brother Kojo saying they are going to visit a place like the Lekman Road. Right? It's rather a recipe of disaster. Okay, why is it so? People are using the road anyhow, driving on the opposite side of the road. Trucks are parked everywhere on the road. So you see, it is our attitude. And if we don't
with absent business
to
banking out, you'll never have to take your eye off the ball.
We can move forward. We can spend a lot on money on development and so on, but if we not enforce the laws and get people to be punished, honestly, we will talk and talk. And
so enforcement is pivotal. Thank you very much, Mr. Gabra, for actually joining the conversation. This is an ongoing conversation, and we're going to keep having it till there is a change in the road statistics, at least as far as accidents are concerned. Thank you very much, Dr. GODFRED DARKWAH, who is actually a transport consultant, Kwame ATUAHENE, who is head of regulations, inspection and compliance with the NRSA, and Cecil Gabra, transport consultant and CEO of Top Tech Limited. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Now, coming up next on the AM show, we dig into sports ahead of the National Division 1 League, which resumes tomorrow. Joy Sports editor George Addo Jr. has put together a special football piece taking a deeper look at Tamale's 8-year Ghana Premier League drought, its dire effect on the economy, infrastructure, and neglect of young talents coming through. That is up next on the AM show. We take a bit of a breather here and we return.